In this video, I'll break down how first-time founders and CEOs of biotech companies can navigate their phase 1 clinical trials in the US efficiently, making the most of every dollar while also laying a solid foundation for future phases. Whether you're venture-backed or bootstrapped, these insights will help you plan a phase 1 trial in a way that is cost-effective and also strategic. For a lot of first-time biotech founders, clinical trials are often viewed as this semi-mystical black box that eat up tons of money with the hope of a new therapy eventually reaching patients. Phase 1 trials alone have a median cost of about $3.4 million, with phase 2 and 3 costing even more. And for a startup operating with limited funds, these costs and challenges can be daunting, which is why having a capital smart strategy is crucial. Some of the topics I'll cover include what a phase 1 trial entails and key steps to prepare for it, like the FDA meetings you need to have, as well as trial design, and also how to budget and fund your trial, and how to make smart choices between outsourcing versus in-house work. A phase 1 clinical trial is the first in human studies for a new drug or therapy. The primary goal here is to assess safety and dosage in a small group of participants, usually about 20 to 100. In a typical phase 1 for drugs, researchers look for any serious side effects to determine a safe dosage range. These trials usually last for a few weeks or a few months and may involve healthy volunteers or participants depending on the disease area. While the efficacy, or whether the drug works or not, isn't the main focus, sometimes phase 1 and 2 trials are designed to examine both safety and early efficacy signals in parallel, especially for serious conditions. Phase 1 studies are critical milestones for startups because it's often the first big go or no-go point. If you can demonstrate that your drug is safe in humans and maybe see a hint of efficacy, then you can significantly increase the value of your asset and your company. In fact, successfully completing a phase 1 can raise your asset's potential value by 2 to 5x because it de-risks the project to a certain extent. It also opens the doors to potentially new funding, or investors and partners gain more confidence once human data is on the table. On the flip side, phase 1 is often the first time a lot of founders face the realities of clinical development in terms of the cost and logistics. It's a high stakes learning curve, and mistakes here, like running out of money mid-trial or designing a poor study, can be very costly. So we're going to talk about how you can plan ahead before you even dose your first patient. As a founder, you and your team need to map out your clinical development plan, even if you don't intend to run all the trials yourself. Think of it as your clinical roadmap from first in human all the way to market approval. This roadmap will help you and your team see the big picture and also signals to investors that you have a clear plan beyond just the science. Even if your goal is to eventually partner up with a pharmaceutical company along the way, you'll need to negotiate from a stronger position if you understand the path to approval yourself. So key questions for you to align during this roadmap include: 1, the trial phase and design. What you're trying to figure out during this period is if you should run a separate phase 1 and phase 2 trial, or combine phase 1 and 2. Combining phases can save time and cost by collecting early efficacy data alongside safety, but it requires a much more complex design and sufficient funding upfront. Another question you're trying to answer is: what is the size and the duration of the study? Roughly, how many patients will you need, and how long will each phase run? This period of planning affects costs and timelines. For example, a phase 1 study with 20 patients is drastically different from a study with 80 patients and can dramatically change up your budget. At this stage, you're also trying to understand dosing and endpoints. How would you dose the therapy? Is it going to be a single dose, a multiple ascending dose? And what are the endpoints that you're trying to measure? In phase 1, endpoints are usually safety related. For example, the number of adverse events reported, or perhaps a biomarker or signal of efficacy. Picking a meaningful yet achievable endpoint is important. And the next question you will be answering is: what are the inclusion-exclusion criteria for the patients that you're going to be bringing into the study? You will need to define the right type of patient with things like age or disease stage, as this can significantly improve your chances of seeing a clear safety or tolerability profile and any efficacy signal as well. By answering these three questions, you will get a high-level view of how your clinical program might unfold and how much money it could require to reach each of these key milestones. This planning isn't also just an internal exercise, but it directly feeds into your fundraising strategy as well. Investors will ask how far a given round of funding will take you. And if you can say, for example, this seed round will get us through an IND and a phase 1 safety trial with 20 patients over 6 months, and back it up with the reasoning, then you will instill confidence. VCs specifically look for realistic staged milestones, e.g., preclinical proof, IND filing, phase 1 safety data, or other things that align with funding needs. Once you have this in place, do not skip early regulatory planning. A savvy first-time founder will engage with the FDA early by scheduling a pre-IND meeting. The FDA encourages these meetings actually to discuss your plan and identify any red flags before you formally submit an IND. This meeting is essentially free advice from the regulators, so take advantage of it. It helps ensure that your phase 1 trial design and your preclinical package meet FDA expectations. And addressing any FDA feedback early can prevent costly do-overs or clinical holds later. If you're completely new to clinical development, you will need to surround yourself with a lot of experience. So find advisors with clinical trial expertise, ideally in your disease area, to team up with or add to your scientific advisory board. You don't necessarily need anybody on board full-time, like a full-time chief medical officer at the pre-phase 1 stage, but consultants or experienced mentors can be worth their weight in gold by helping you avoid rookie errors. Now, when it comes to the actual phase 1 trial design, simplicity and focus is key. A phase 1 trial designed for a drug in the US usually follows a protocol that outlines everything: objectives, design, number of subjects, dose levels, safety and monitoring, and so forth. You don't necessarily need a 100-page detailed protocol from day one, because a short trial design, usually 2 to 4 pages, can be enough to discuss with advisors or to pitch to investors. The key is that your design should be strategic and lean. So you need to keep your phase 1 objectives narrow. The primary goal is safety and tolerability. Design your trial to gather the safety data required to move to a phase 2. If you can also sneak in a secondary endpoint to get a peek at efficacy, like a biomarker or a preliminary clinical outcome, then great. But don't overcompensate a phase 1 with too many aims. A straightforward phase 1 safety trial, or a single ascending dose or multiple ascending doses in a few cohorts, is easier and faster and cheaper. Another thing you need to do is resist the urge to over-enroll patients just to be safe on statistical power. Phase 1 is usually not powered by efficacy, so extra patients beyond what's needed for safety may not be a good use of capital. Use just enough subjects to meet safety objectives and to meet regulatory expectations as well. For example, if regulators agree that 20 patients are sufficient to access safety for your indication, don't test 60. Each additional patient adds cost in terms of recruitment, clinic visits, drug supply, and time. And something you may also want to do is to consider combining a phase 1 and 2 design. In some cases, a phase 1 and 2 trial can be designed where once the initial safety is confirmed in a small group, then the trial seamlessly expands into a phase 2 to look at efficacy. This can save time and money by avoiding a full stop and restart between phases. However, combining trials are usually complex and usually larger in scope upfront. For a first-time founder, it might be ambitious unless you have strong backing or the indication demands it. Another aspect of phase 1 trial design is deciding where you'll run the trial and who will oversee it medically. A capital smart approach may be to limit the number of trial sites in phase 1 to a single site to reduce overhead. With fewer sites, you have fewer contracts, less travel, and simpler logistics. You might need to partner with one hospital or clinical research unit experienced in phase 1 trials. Also, choose an investigator with a good track record. They can help with recruitment and ensure quality data. While you're preparing for the logistics of running the study, you also need to start preparing for how you will manufacture the drug. Make sure that your drug supply chain is ready for that study and plan how you'll manufacture this drug under good manufacturing practice and have it packaged for the trial. You can outsource this to a specialized manufacturing organization or CMO, and this is always the most capital efficient choice for a startup. So when you're choosing CMOs, you want to reach out to a bunch of them and find the one that meets your budget and timeline needs. They can also assist with the chemistry, manufacturing, and controls part of your IND filing. A good CMO partner ensures that you have quality drug product when you need it without a massive upfront investment in facilities. So now we've had our protocol designed and we have our CMO in place. The next strategic decision that you will have to make as a first-time founder is how much of the trial process you would outsource to a CRO or if you would handle this internally. It's essentially a time versus money trade-off. Let me break this down. CROs can save you time, but will cost you more money, whereas doing things in-house can conserve cash, but take more of your team's time. So every startup must find the right balance between the spectrum. Even with heavy outsourcing, you cannot completely set and forget a clinical trial because you outsourced it to a CRO. So even if your study is completely outsourced, you will still have to have someone on your team who will be spending a significant chunk of their time coordinating the trial with the CRO, answering questions and making decisions, even if the CRO runs the day-to-day. But beyond that minimum, you have flexibility. You could keep more tasks in-house. So if you choose to hire a CRO, this is what you should look for. You may want to hire a full service CRO. These are basically CROs that help you with everything from trial design, regulatory filings, and even attending your FDA meetings with you. These CROs can also run trials at their site or network and manage data analysis. This is the most hands-off in terms of day-to-day you can get when working with a CRO. The trade-off here is cost, because full service packages are expensive. For a well-funded venture-backed startup, this may be acceptable to go fast. A full service CRO can also bring a lot of experience, potentially preventing some mistakes that you may make. So if you have the budget, hiring a full service CRO is like hiring an experienced clinical department on demand. Just remember, you still need to stay actively involved in oversight. It's your trial and ultimately it's your responsibility. Another thing may be to partially outsource. Perhaps you outsource some aspects but not others. For example, you might contract out data management and monitoring and IRB coordination to a CRO, but keep project management or patient recruitment closer to home. And the third option is to keep everything in-house. This is usually the option for a lot of cash-strapped companies or teams that just really want to have complete control. You may try to manage the trial mostly in-house, piecing together contractors on your own team to do what a CRO would normally do. For example, your small team might write the protocol, find and contract directly with trial sites, which may be a hospital or clinic, and manage the data collection using an off-shelf software. This can minimize cost, but it's very labor intensive and risky if you lack the experience. It might work for a bootstrapped company or an academic founded startup that is essentially running an investigator initiated trial with grant money. So for a lot of first time founders, they often land somewhere in the middle of outsourcing certain parts of the trial and running certain parts in-house. Now let's talk about the money in detail. We already noted that a typical phase 1 trial can cost to the order of a few $1,000,000, about 3.4 million to be exact. The cost of your trial could be lower or higher depending on factors like the therapeutic area or whether you need special types of assays or imaging. As a founder, getting a realistic budget early by soliciting quotes or talking to experts is really important for you to help make a decision on how much you will need upfront. So, and it's important that you never start a trial unless you're confident you have the funds to finish it. Running out of money mid-trial is one of the worst case scenarios that you can have, as it can completely invalidate your data. The results may not be usable and it will be a complete waste of money that has already been spent. It's also harmful to patients who have signed up to take part in the study and who could be severely hurt. And that could severely hurt your credibility with investors and regulators. So if you're fundraising for a phase 1 clinical trial, what you want to do is focus on raising a dedicated round, often like a Series A or a specific bridge round with the explicit goal to fund the phase 1 trial. You can also do staged or tranched funding in some cases, which means that you may arrange with investors to release funds in stages which are tied to milestones. For example, a venture fund could commit a total of $6 million to your phase 1, but give $3 million now and $3 million when you've enrolled the first patient and are cleared for safety and efficacy checkpoint. If fundraising is out of the question, then you can also just run extremely lean. Consider like starting with a very small pilot study, for instance, and you may do an initial phase 1 in a single site where costs are lower or in a country where costs are lower. A lot of startups are doing these studies in places like Australia or Canada to save money and time, and then do a phase 1B or 2 in the US later. But since we're focused on the US, just know that some US startups look abroad for phase 1 due to the costs or tax incentives. While planning your budget, you also need to keep a contingency plan, because no matter how well you budget, assume and be rest assured that things will always take longer than expected. Patients may drop out and need replacing. The FDA may ask you for extra information, or manufacturing can yield lower than planned, requiring another batch. And now that we're done with fundraising, and the last thing is you need to be diligent with trial compliance. This includes things like IRB approvals, patient-informed consent processes, and ethics, because violations or protocol deviations can cause the trial to pause or the data to be thrown out. This is an avoidable cost, and many first-time founders underestimate the importance of just having good clinical operations practice. And last thing I want to touch on here is a lot of founders often wonder if being venture-backed or bootstrapped can change the clinical strategy. And the answer to that is it depends. If you're venture-backed, you likely have a larger budget upfront from a seed or Series A financing. And this can afford you some luxuries, perhaps using a full-service CRO to go faster, or certain activities that you can do in parallel. For instance, you can scale up manufacturing while the trial is going on. However, investors will expect that you use this capital efficiently to hit value-inflected milestones. Being venture-backed can also allow you to attract top talent like an experienced chief medical officer or clinical project manager. But if you're not venture-backed and you're bootstrapped, your focus will be on maximizing every dollar and leveraging creativity. So bootstrap founders, a lot of them may rely on non-dilutive funding, which may mean that progress is a little bit slower. Bootstrapped founders can also explore collaboration opportunities, like finding an academic investigator who is interested in your therapy and run a phase 1 as an investigator-initiated trial with federal grants. So irrespective of whether you're bootstrapped or venture founded, it doesn't really change the clinical strategy. What it comes down to is the level of creativity and luxuries that you're able to be afforded depending on what stage you are in.